Normal hemoglobin does not always mean optimal iron stores.
So someone can technically not be anemic, but yet still have symptoms.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually one of the biggest misconceptions about iron deficiency. For many women, it can show up as hair loss, low energy, feeling completely drained by the end of the day. Chronic stress may contribute to changes in how the body manages and utilizes iron, while the low iron stores can also leave people feeling more fatigued, less resilient, and less able to cope with stress.
Welcome to the science of well-being. Have you ever been told your labs look normal, you're exhausted, workouts are harder, maybe your hair is shedding, you're anxious, you're waking up tired, and no one can explain why? What if the one missing piece wasn't your thyroid, your hormones, and isn't simply stress, but more the relationship between your iron and stress? Today, we're diving into the fascinating connection between ferritin, iron status, chronic stress, and fatigue with Jessica Brewer, a physician assistant and founder of Wellbeings Medical.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, many people have heard of iron, many people have heard of anemia, but ferritin is a term most people don't understand. What exactly is ferritin and why should people care about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, ferritin is one of those lab markers I really wish more people understood because it can provide clues long before someone actually develops anemia. Ferritin is a protein stored inside your cells. It stores iron and releases it when your body needs it. It acts as your body's iron savings account. Measuring the amount of ferritin in your blood provides an accurate reflection of your total body iron reserves. Most people have heard of iron in the context of hemoglobin or anemia, but iron is involved in so much more than oxygen transport and red blood cells. It's important for energy production, brain function, exercise performance, healthy hair growth, and many other day to day processes. When we evaluate iron status, there's really two questions we're asking. One, how much iron is currently being used? And two, how much iron do you have in storage? That's where hemoglobin and ferritin tell us different parts of the story. I often use the analogy of a checking account and a savings account. Your hemoglobin is like your checking account. It tells us how much iron is currently being used to make red blood cells and deliver oxygen throughout the body, which is the most important function of iron from a survival standpoint. Your ferritin level is like your savings account. It tells us how much iron is stored for future needs. For this conversation, we'll refer to ferritin levels as iron stores.
So I love that analogy. That is a really nice way to describe it because a lot of people think if their iron levels are normal, then their ferritin levels must be normal. And that's not the case.
Yeah, exactly. It's not the case. They are two different things and they measure two different things. So the body's also incredibly smart. So oxygen delivery is essential for survival. So the body works very hard to keep hemoglobin in a normal range. So when iron intake isn't keeping up with the iron losses, the body starts withdrawing from the iron storage to keep producing those healthy red blood cells. That's why someone can have a completely normal hemoglobin level, but steadily declining iron stores. The checking account still looks okay because the body's quietly draining the savings account. So if listeners remember one thing from today's conversation, it's this. Normal hemoglobin does not always mean optimal iron stores.
So someone can technically not be anemic, but yet still have symptoms.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear that from my patients all the time. They're like, no, my provider told me I'm not anemic, and their ferritin is just very low. It's actually one of the biggest misconceptions about iron deficiency. Many people assume that if they're not anemic, their iron stores must be fine. But in reality, there's often a stage that comes before anemia when the iron stores are already running low. It's kind of like your gas light comes on, right? There's a warning sign before you run out of gas.
Thank
That's
goodness.
exactly. That's when symptoms really start showing up. So for athletes or active individuals, these might show up as slower recovery, declining performance. For professionals, it may feel like increased brain fog, difficulty concentrating or focusing. For many women, it can show up as hair loss, low energy, feeling completely drained by the end of the day. The key point is that you can still have symptoms without showing as anemic in your hemoglobin or your standard labs.
So many people just quite frankly feel like crap. They're told they're fine because they have normal hemoglobin levels, normal iron levels, with unexplained fatigue and other symptoms. And what a horrible thing to go through life feeling like crap if you don't have to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see this all the time too in practice where patients come with their lab report and it's either one or two things. They said they're fine, right? Or they're normal. And either they fall into a normal range, perhaps with ferritin, but maybe it's not optimal, or they just never checked ferritin at all. So them saying your labs are normal and you're fine, they didn't even check the ferritin level. So it could be one or two of those things. But yeah, normal on a lab report doesn't always mean optimal.
What about chronic stress? Most people watching this are under chronic stress. So, how does stress play into ferritin or iron storage levels?
Yeah, so chronic stress, can have a profound impact on the body on iron regulation and ferritin levels. What's fascinating is that the relationship appears to go both directions. Chronic stress may contribute to changes in how the body manages and utilizes iron, while the low iron stores can also leave people feeling more fatigued, less resilient, and less able to cope with stress. It's a little like the classic question, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Sometimes stress may be contributing to the problem, and sometimes low iron may be making the effects of stress feel even worse.
When it comes to chronic stress and iron stores, it's a two-way street, a bit of a feed forward cycle, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a few ways chronic stress can influence iron status. Firstly, chronic stress can increase inflammation. That inflammation can raise a hormone called hepcidin, which acts as a gatekeeper for iron. When hepcidin rises, the body absorbs less iron from the food and becomes really less willing to release it for use. So you could have plenty of iron, but your body is unable to use it because of the high inflammation caused
So
by the
even
chronic
if you're
stress.
taking iron supplements, if you're under chronic stress, you may not be absorbing the iron.
Yeah, because of the increase in
Wow.
hepcidin. Yeah, it blocks it
Okay.
basically. And secondly, stress can affect digestion. I think all of this is not a new concept to us, but long-term stress can impact stomach acid production, gut function, gut motility, nutrient absorption, making it harder for the body to absorb iron effectively. So you need both absorption and digestion to be able to absorb nutrients, right? So even if you're taking in iron supplements, if your digestion is off because of all the stress you're under, still may not be working. And lastly, stress often really changes our daily habits, right? We may eat less nutrient dense foods, a lot of sugar, right? We're trying to get that sugar high, the carbs. We rely more heavily on caffeine, which actually inhibits the absorption of iron. Sleeping poorly, we're overtraining, trying to balance out the stress, right? All of these, which can make it really hard to maintain healthy iron levels. So while stress isn't really the only cause of low ferritin, it can absolutely contribute to the cycle and making it more difficult for the body to keep up with its iron stores.
Most people think of stress as emotional, but the stress has a biological and physical consequence on our ferritin slash iron levels, gut health, and lifestyle choices. So, chronic stress and cortisol. You cannot go anywhere on social media without getting blasted information about cortisol. I know as a woman in my 40s, it's either cortisol, sourdough, or some type of protein social
Yep.
media. But what are common misconceptions with cortisol?
Yeah, I think people automatically associate cortisol as being a bad thing. And it can be when it's imbalanced, but cortisol is actually one of the reasons we're alive, right? It helps us wake up in the morning, it regulates our blood sugar, it supports our blood pressure. It helps us to respond to challenges throughout the day as appropriately. And so the goal really isn't to eliminate cortisol. Again, it's not a bad thing. We need cortisol. We'd be dead without it. But the goal is to support healthy cortisol flexibility. So your cortisol rises when it needs to rise and also can lower or be balanced, right, when it's no longer needed. It's like when people say, oh, you're running from a bear, right? You need that energy. You need the adrenaline. You need all of your senses to be heightened, right? But that running from a bear in today's society is a ping on your phone, right? A text message, an email coming through constantly throughout the day. We're just being triggered. Clinically, through 24-hour saliva cortisol testing, I see all sorts of cortisol dysregulation patterns from very high all day long to very low all day long. And then the imbalanced one, right, where it's low during the day when you want it high and it's high at night when you're trying to sleep, causing some insomnia and issues. So when cortisol becomes dysregulated, that is when we start seeing more downstream effects on sleep, recovery, inflammation, metabolism, weight, mood, energy, all the things.
So, bringing the ferritin and iron storage back into the picture, when we discussed earlier about how chronic stress can contribute to changes in iron and ferritin levels, is it the other way around? Can that be flipped?
Yeah, so I think that's where the body's interconnectedness really becomes apparent. Iron isn't just important for making red blood cells, it's also involved in energy production, brain function, and the production of neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin. So when your iron stores become depleted, the body starts prioritizing essential functions like oxygen delivery and survival. So as a result, people may begin experiencing symptoms like fatigue, brain fog, poor concentration, reduced exercise recovery, low motivation, anxiety, and sleep disturbances. And when you're constantly exhausted, not sleeping well, and struggling to keep up with the daily demands, your body can start feeling like it's under ongoing stress. So it's not necessarily that low ferritin directly causes stress. It's that low iron stores make you feel less resilient to the physical and emotional stressors, which may contribute to a cycle where stress feels harder to manage and recovery becomes more difficult. That's why we often see these two issues occurring together and influencing one another in that feed forward cycle.
Who's the most vulnerable to this besides people under chronic stress?
I would say women are the most susceptible to iron loss because they lose a significant amount of iron with their menstrual cycle. I would say the women that feel like they're doing everything right, they're counting their macros, they're eating, they're exercising, and they really just feel so exhausted at the end of the day. There's other certain groups that I pay particularly close attention to in practice. Women who have had multiple pregnancies or recently had a baby. Pregnancy places a huge, tremendous demand on iron stores in the body. Women in perimenopause who may be experiencing heavier cycles, more unpredictable, closer together cycles. Women who recently entered menopause because they're no longer cycling, the body can take a long time to recover from maybe those earlier unpredictable cycles they were having. I would say athletes are a big group. The ones that are putting a lot of strain on their body, they're training for a marathon, they're weightlifting 5, 6 days a week, because the more we ask of our bodies, we have to have more resources, right? So we go through more iron stores for the energy production, the recovery. As you mentioned, men and women who live under chronic stress. I would say I'm also really paying attention to the patients who are now around GLP-1s for an extended period of time. These medications are incredibly beneficial, or can be, but when someone has been in a prolonged calorie deficit and they're eating significantly less overall, we want to make sure they're still meeting their nutritional needs, which includes iron. Frequent blood donors, right? They're giving away their iron every single month or multiple times a month. Vegans, vegetarians who aren't eating enough of the animal-based iron. So the common theme in all of this is if you're feeling persistently tired, you're not recovering well, you're losing hair, struggling with focus, or simply not feeling yourself, it's worth asking whether iron may be a part of your story.
For our listeners, are there any clinical studies that show iron can help with the feeling of fatigue?
Yeah, so researchers have actually looked into this. For those that love digging into the studies, there was a randomized control trial involving women who were experiencing fatigue despite having normal hemoglobin levels and ferritin levels below 50. For reference, many functional and preventative medicine providers often consider ferritin levels between 50 and 100 to be more optimal, but that lab report won't flag a ferritin as abnormal until it's under 20. So in this study, after 12 weeks of oral iron supplementation, the fatigue improved by 50% more than it did in the placebo group. I would say the other thing is there's different types of iron, right? Some are more highly absorbable, some are less constipating. So it's worth having that conversation with your medical provider before just going out and buying a supplement, right? To make sure you're on the right one that's for your body.
I would assume before going out and doing any supplement, making sure you get your baseline labs first and work with your medical provider to advise you on that.
So if low ferritin is contributing to someone's symptoms, improving iron status through supplementation or nutrition can make a meaningful difference in how they feel, as the study showed. But the key takeaway isn't that everyone listening should immediately start taking an iron supplement, right? The takeaway is that symptoms deserve an investigation. Fatigue isn't a diagnosis. Brain fog isn't a diagnosis. Poor recovery isn't a diagnosis. They're all clues. For some people, low ferritin may be a part of the answer. For others, it may be stress, sleep, hormones, nutrition, thyroid function, or a combination of all those factors. That's really why I'm such a believer in testing rather than just guessing. So if your ferritin is low, then yes, iron supplementation may be a part of your solution. But it's really equally important to understand why your ferritin became low in the first place. The goal isn't just to raise the lab value. The goal is to really help you feel better and address the root cause.
It's so easy in today's world for men and women to chalk up symptoms like that, like fatigue, irritability, brain fog, just to getting busier, getting older, raising a family, being busy with a career, and just trying to keep up. And these symptoms aren't just a normal part of aging or a packed schedule. We do not have to feel like crap. Um, and I can't stress that enough because that is the feeling when you have low iron stores. And sometimes they're clues, right, that deserve deeper attention.
Ferritin is definitely a small but important part of the larger well-being picture.
How would you guide patients if they are experiencing these symptoms and don't have a definitive answer?
Yeah, so ferritin is actually a really easy lab test. You can just ask your primary care physician to add to your annual visits. When you get the results, though, remember a normal level does not always equal optimal. So your ferritin should be between 50 and 100 to be considered optimal for well being, that daily quality of life functioning. If you're interested in a deeper dive with fatigue, I would recommend seeking out a qualified functional medicine practitioner who's trained in cortisol testing. I personally am licensed to treat patients who are in California, Texas, or Georgia. So if you reside in one of those states, you can find my information in the comments below. Otherwise, a quick Google search online, you should be able to find a provider for your state.
If there's one thing I hope listeners take away from today's conversation, it's this. Fatigue may be common, but it's not something that you should accept as normal. Sometimes the answer is stress, and sometimes it's low ferritin, and it's often a combination of factors that deserve a closer look. At the Science of Wellbeing, we focus on three things: understanding, regulating, and optimizing. First, understanding what's happening in your body, regulating the factors that may be contributing to it, and then optimizing your health with the right information, the right testing, and the right support. If today's episode helped you think differently about fatigue, stress, or iron health, please be sure to subscribe and let us know in the comments. You can also find Jessica's information in the comments if you want to reach out to her. Have you had your ferritin checked? We'll see you next time.